In 2020, my life collapsed. On a Tuesday, my dog was really sick. On Wednesday, my partner who I'd been living with told me that they were in love with their coworker.
Oh, no.
On Thursday,
Wow.
the relationship broke up. On Friday, the world went into a lockdown for COVID.
No.
Saturday,
God.
my partner moved out. 5 days later, my dog died. And I was alone
Oh
in the
my
house I
God.
was supposed to have these retreats in by myself without a dog for the next 3 months.
We're Elisa and Lily, the mother-daughter creators of StyleLikeU. And after interviewing hundreds of trailblazing individuals for our channel, we've been inspired to join the conversation and ask,
What would the world look like if everyone was told from the moment they were born, don't change a thing? What a different world that would be.
we seem to be like matching accidentally a little daily.
I just always have to be in layers. I'm like a layer cake. I have my favorite things. This skirt is one of them that I've had for like ever, and I love it so, so much. If I was going to go on a desert island and pick something, it might be this skirt.
My ass. Sorry.
And,
There's no way that that's the one thing you would pick.
Yeah.
You would
But
say,
it is
she would
really-
say that about everything.
Well, first of all, I love denim. I love denim. When I'm thinking in the morning of what I'm going to wear, I'm wearing a velvet suit and I just put this skirt over the pants and
Naturally.
yeah. And it's just like a different way of wearing it. It's not simple. It's not straightforward. It's a little complicated like me. That's all. No, frayed, like a little frayed and they got a little
You
short.
also have a bunch of food on the back.
Oh,
of
I do?
those.
Well, don't say that. Tell me about all your details because I'm kind of obsessing on the navy blue velvet socks, I have to say.
They match your shoes. They match your suit.
Oh, yeah.
Whoa.
Velvet.
We're denim and blue.
I love midnight navy velvet. That's like,
I
I think a shirt would look good. I should make a shirt.
I feel like my outfit says that I'm like not as complicated as you. I don't feel identified
you're-
with being complicated.
No, you're not complicated.
I don't
like
think
me.
I'm complicated. I'm in this like leotard.
Even the pearls are hanging down in the cleavage. I have no cleavage. Okay, go ahead. My pearls are not hanging in my cleavage.
I'm in this like simple, sophisticated. I'm in my elegant era. Yeah, with the velvet socks and the heels every day, and these like simple colors, but always a pop of color. I feel very weird if I'm not wearing a pop of color. Yeah, and this happens to us a lot where we do have like weird like shared color palettes or like certain things that do kind of like connect us. And I feel like that's like, yeah.
Angel, shush.
Don't scream, Mom.
Be quiet, Angel. Thank you. Oh, and Angel also has a royal blue sweater on today. We should have brought her on.
Yeah. How you feeling today?
I'm feeling good, especially since it's one of the first days in 2 weeks that my eye isn't hurting, actually.
Oh, really? That's good. What's wrong with your eye?
It was just like a regular Saturday morning, walk the dogs, was about to feed them, about to go swimming. And all of a sudden I felt like I had something in my eye. I felt like I had this pebble in my eye. And every time I blinked, I felt like a pebble was scratching my eye. Long story short, it took the 4th eye doctor and 5 doctors, including the emergency room at Cedars-Sinai, to find a long eyelash stuck under my eyelid. But it was excruciatingly painful.
Were you able to surrender to the pain, or were you fighting it and resisting it? And
Did I surrender?
I don't think you surrendered.
Not really.
No, I'm pretty sure you didn't
I
surrender.
even did your whole closet shoot.
Yeah.
It was like a 12-hour day or something. And I did the whole thing with my eye killing me.
Yeah, you're not very good at stopping, which is like I admire to some degree. Like you've taught me a strong work ethic, but maybe not learning how to like listen to your body and stop before it gets out of control.
It's so hard for me. Just letting go when something is hurting me or I don't feel well is literally equal to me getting on a roller coaster.
She's really afraid of roller coasters.
I cannot get on a roller coaster.
I love
it's
roller
like-
coasters.
See? Well, you see? Improvement.
Yeah.
Breaking chains.
Well, I just find roller coasters to be so freeing because I'm such a control freak and I'm like so in my head all the time. And in that like 2 minutes, it's just like I have to surrender to this moment and there's nothing else I can think about. So it's like feels meditative.
Yeah, they're therapy.
We're gonna get you to Six Flags soon.
I cannot do the roller coaster and I can never give in when I don't feel well. It's just I mean, I have to. And I'm aware of it. I'm very aware of my need to surrender to my body in addition to the ways that I've done it in other ways, like around dressing or aging and or all these other things. There's still these
Mm-hmm.
things that just I'm not at peace with in terms of, allowing myself to listen to it in other moments, like
Right.
not feeling well.
And like you're really accepting of the aesthetic part of aging and like embracing your wrinkles or, still feeling relevant and like you can dress however you want, but you maybe aren't accepting of like the ways that your body is like actually aging from like a pain perspective.
That's true.
Which like it's honestly hard for me as like your daughter because you do have such a like youthful spirit and like you don't sort of appear to what we were conditioned to think a 65-year-old or 66-year-old looks like, that it's actually hard for me to draw the connection that, oh yeah, maybe you're having a lot of back pain because you're 66, because you don't seem to me like
Right.
you're old or whatever. You probably don't even get it yourself that that's what it is.
I refuse.
You don't accept, you refuse, you resist. No, you have to accept.
No, I do. I have to accept.
We've done a lot of work, both of us, myself included, in accepting our bodies physically, or as far as how they appear. But I do feel like I'm doing a lot of work still with like, letting go of control. If I have to slow down, not letting my to-do list like run my life. That's a big one for me that I'm still have a ways to go with.
That I so lovingly gave to you.
It's also why doing interviews is always like a place where I feel like I am like letting go and like it's one of the places I feel like the most present in life. It is like more of a space of like being and just total presence with whoever we're with. And
I totally share that with you. I live for those moments, like that kind of moment, merging, connecting, being present with someone else. Everything else just fades away.
I actually get sad every time an interview's over.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, oh, now I have to go back to like that other part of my brain.
And then it also shows you like the healing power of that connection.
So speaking of how much we love interviewing people and how it's our favorite place to be, are you excited for today's interview?
Yeah, I'm so excited that we have Sonya Renee Taylor as our next guest because she's someone that I have deeply admired for a long time. I'm very inspired by, and I feel really honored, and I feel very excited about it.
Don't you sometimes feel like you want to pinch yourself with like who we get to talk to? Like these people that I like look at on the internet and I'm like, you're the fucking coolest person ever. And so for those of you that don't know, Sonya Renee Taylor is an author and an activist and a speaker and an everything incredible person.
Poet. Poet.
She's written 7 books, one of which is a New York Times bestseller called The Body Is Not an Apology, The Power of Radical Self-Love. She also is the founder of a media and education company with the same name, The Body Is Not an Apology. Yeah, she basically just stands for what StyleLikeU stands for and articulates what StyleLikeU stands for and lives and breathes what StyleLikeU stands for and beyond. She puts it into words better than we ever can. She is so profound in how she speaks about self-love, body acceptance, and how being oneself, loving oneself, releasing shame is the path to like not only your own liberation, but the liberation of every person and society at large. And
she's a huge believer in radical self-love, and that has been something that I have recently come to understand in my own self. So I'm very excited because I've just recently discovered it myself.
And she's the expert of all experts in radical self-love.
Yeah.
She says, you cannot shame that which I'm willing to be. It's the full concept of this show, just said in a different way, which is like that once you own the thing that society taught you was quote unquote wrong with you or an imperfection or something to hide or fix or change, then it's like, it's your power, it's your path. You have to reclaim these things that we've been taught to have shame around in order to be the freest, most healed person for yourself and for the world.
That's the revolution.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of releasing shame, my mom and I are not the best self-promoters, and that might bring a little bit of shame up for us, but we are going to shamelessly promote ourselves and say that if you are liking what you're watching and you want to watch more episodes of Don't Change a Thing every Thursday on our YouTube channel, you can do so by subscribing to StyleLikeU with the letter U on YouTube. Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Sonya.
So I just want to begin by saying how deeply honored we are to have you here. We so admire your work. It's been very inspiring to us. So we're so grateful that you've taken the time. I know you're really busy, and it means a lot to us that you're here and that that we get to have this chance to connect with you like this on our very shared mutual in many ways, mission of life.
Absolutely.
It just kind of blows my mind sometimes the collective consciousness and the things that people are doing in a parallel way. And it's so powerful
Yeah.
that, for us, it was like we felt we had to have people come in and take strip to like deliver that message. While you were the body's not an
Right.
apology,
Right.
at the same time, and you had your own
Mm.
pings around that in
Yeah.
those moments. And
Yeah.
so I'm so grateful to you
Thank
for all
you.
of that.
It's such
So
an honor
thank
to have you
you
here.
so much from the bottom of our hearts.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's so beautiful. And I just want to thank you all for your offering in the world. One, it's just been beautiful watching people I love get naked. That's fun. But also just I can so see from the first time I ever sort of encountered Style Like You, I was like, oh, yay, kindred people on the journey
Mm.
who get it, who understand like that it's so not about all of these stories we've been fed about who we're supposed to be.
Mm.
And it's this beautiful invitation to just be. And it's just been beautiful watching so many people come and be celebrated in that and watching you all celebrate folks in that. And I'm grateful to get the chance to get to be a part of what it seems like a really beautiful legacy.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you so much. We really appreciate that.
So our first question for you is just, how are you feeling right now?
Oh, I'm so good. I'm so good. I just got done telling someone yesterday that it feels so important to say that right now. The world is not so good right now, right?
Mhm.
Like there is endless tragedy and violence, and it's a really dark time. It can be. And I think there's a pull to make that story the story, right? And it feels so important to be, if nothing else, I feel like in my life, part of my assignment is just to be the contrast. And I'm just like, yes, there is this thing that exists, but it's not the only thing that exists.
Mhm.
And that it is possible to still be able to have deep, profound joy,
Mhm.
even in all of this grief, even in all of this sorrow.
Mhm.
And so I'm sort of unapologetically joyful right now.
I really, it's helpful to hear you say that because I am really struggling with that
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah. It's hard. It's
Yeah.
a hard time, but I think part of what we forget is that to be corny and quote, Martin Luther King Jr., but we should quote him. Like it's darkness doesn't drive out darkness, light does.
Right.
Right. And I don't think that that's
Absolutely.
cliche. I think there's truth in that.
Mhm.
And the more that we succumb to the darkness in the world, the bigger and the more all consuming it becomes. It is my job to be the light it is that leads me out of the darkness, right? If nobody else, I got to get me out of it. And that requires my light. And so seeking it is as much an act of resistance as anything else right now.
I really agree with that. And it's not corny. It's not corny. It's serious.
It's wildly
serious
powerful, which is
stuff.
why they want
Yeah.
us to think it's corny.
Right.
Which is why they want us to think it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
It's some silly, paltry thing. Because if we were tapped into what it really can do, all of these systems would fall. Period.
Completely. And
Yeah.
the hardest thing to do is to radically self-love yourself, which we're going to get into.
Can we talk a little bit about like what your style says about you, which is so bright and light, and this
Yeah.
outfit today, and like what it says about you and where you're at today?
Yeah. So I was uncertain what to wear. Like I've been living out of suitcases for 2 years. And so all of this journey around travel began with me giving away 95% of everything I own, including most of my clothes. Style became this thing that had to live outside of clothing, right? Like style became something really different for me for a while. And I think it became more like essence than style. Like, what is the essence of you? And how does the essence of you be out in the world? Even if you got the same outfit you had on last week, it's leggings again today, Sonya. At the beginning of the year, I took my first trip to Western Africa. I went to Senegal, and it was such a transformative and wildly healing time. And while I was there, I was connected with a seamstress, and she made this outfit. I got to pick. I went to the market. It was busy and it was loud, and I bartered with the guy selling the garments, and I picked the fabrics, and then she was like, "What do you want?" And I got to like just go on Google and look at things I liked, and then she was like, "Okay, we can make that." And she made this jumpsuit, and I loved it. I just loved the vibrancy of the material and the color and the swirl, and I
Mhm.
think I'm definitely a person you're going to catch in color.
Mm.
Like,
Mhm.
again, light.
Mhm.
One of the things that I realized right at the beginning of my sort of journeying around the world, over the last 2 years, I was on my way to Peru, and I decided that the day I was going on this trip, I was going to like dress up. I had this
Mhm.
really fabulous yellow gown with like belt sleeves, and it was just doing the most in the airport.
Mm.
So much so that like as I went up the escalator, I toppled down the escalator in this gown, like my suitcases. It was a whole
Wow.
scene. But what I said that morning as I started my journey was like, whatever is going to happen, my job is to stay seated in my throne. That was the visual I was working with. And it was really like, how do I stay seated in my inner throne, right? In
Mhm.
the dignity of myself. How do
Mhm.
I stay in the dignity of myself
Mhm.
as I go on this trip that I have no idea how it's all going to turn out? And I realized that as I was walking through the airport, people were so delighted. They were so delighted to look at me in this dress. They were so delighted to see me in this inner experience of sitting in the throne of myself. And I was like, this is part of my work, right? Like, and
Mhm.
it, like part of what it is that I desire to give the world is the joy I feel. Like, what I
Mhm.
want to
Mhm.
pass on is radical self
Mhm.
love through my beingness, right? And it was like, oh, right. Clothing is an expression, an extension of my
Mhm.
beingness.
Mhm.
It doesn't make my beingness.
Mhm.
It says, here is something deeper inside that I want to communicate to you.
Mhm.
So this outfit felt like I want to communicate this transformative experience that I had in Senegal and what it meant to go back to one of the locations of the beginning of the transatlantic slave trade, to walk
Mhm.
into a slave castle where my ancestors took a journey that ultimately led to my existence,
Mhm.
right? Like, what does that look like? And what does it look like to go back to that place and reclaim a joy that that trip never meant for me to have?
Mm.
Right. And how
Wow.
do I reflect that every day? Right.
Mhm.
And so when I put this outfit on, that's what it feels like. It feels like there's something about, I've been thinking a lot about like tarot. And one of the things that resonates for me around that trip is the Fool card. And in the Fool card in tarot, it's like this sort of like jester standing on his tippy toes on the end of a cliff, right? Like about to jump off.
Mhm.
But there's something so light and so playful and so exciting and so celebratory, even though this image looks like a person about to jump off a cliff. And there's something in the beginning, right? In the like starting over energy, in the
Mm.
like, I'm at a point that is going to start again. And in that starting again, I trust.
Wow.
And
And jump off a
and I
cliff.
jump off a cliff because
That's
something's going to
That's
catch me.
it's a form of radical self-love.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's to know you're going to be held.
And how
Uh,
connected you are,
And yes.
and here for a reason.
Yes,
It's so
exactly.
interesting that you say that because yesterday, when we did our first interview
Huh.
for this new show, the two of us at the end were like, "Wow, we feel like we're beginners again."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like it's such a vulnerable but exciting and like out of control in the good way
Yes.
feeling. The comfort's actually not where it's at.
No, that's not where the
Yeah.
growth is. That's not where the juice is. That's not
Mhm.
where the excitement
Mhm.
is. I wanted something that felt like that
Mhm.
felt like, oh, I'm at the precipice of
Mhm.
something and I get to fully embrace
Mhm.
it. I'm going loudly.
Mm.
Because that's how you expand to your most, obviously the style part is a huge part of our message and like what we're trying to deliver is that it's your whole self.
Yeah.
Everything about yourself. There shouldn't be one corner, one little piece, not a pinky, not a nothing that isn't you fully.
Yes. Yes.
And it just what you were saying about the clothing and about the yellow gown and everything. I love that image of being in the airport and all that because I feel like I want a world. That's the world I want. I want to go buy milk and I want to see people
Right.
in yellow gowns.
And just
Yeah.
outlandish.
That's what I
Give me
want.
sequence at the grocery
Yeah,
store.
That's really part of my
Yes.
drive. Like my vision of all of this at the end of the day is that you're seeing that all the time. Like everyone is waking up in the morning and going, I'm gonna wear this inside out. I'm gonna tie this
Yes.
dress on my head. I'm
Right.
gonna wear my shoes backwards. I'm
Right.
gonna,
Right. Like,
yeah,
forget all the rules. And what if every day is the special occasion?
yeah,
Yes.
exactly. And
What
you
if
never know
every
who you're
day?
gonna see
Right.
and who you're gonna
Right.
connect to or what your experience is gonna be, and you want to be seen
Yes.
for exactly who you are.
Exactly.
And was there ever a time with your style where you felt like you were conforming or dimming your light or not, expressing who you are?
Yeah, I think this is part of sort of like me in this journey of radical self-love is that there's always been something moving inside of me, getting me closer and closer. And so I feel like over time, I've certainly gotten more and more expressive, more fully embodied in that, but there's always been a seed of it. But there was also conforming, like I remember being in middle school. I remember the first time I went to a wedding and I needed to like find a dress for the wedding. And at the time, this woman my dad was dating, she was like, well, you're going to need some undergarments for that. And so it was the first time I ever bought a girdle. She made me buy a girdle. And I spent the next 20 years thinking that I absolutely needed to wear a girdle under my clothes. And there was a way in which I kind of convinced myself that I did and that I liked it. And maybe I do. There is some like constriction stuff I kind of like, little bondage play, whatever.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's what I was tapped into at the time. I think that I was listening to this message about like, your jiggle and shake is not appropriate, right? Like and so there's definitely been a sort of shedding over time, more and more shedding of that, more unapologetically jiggly, more unapologetically, letting whatever it is that is me be. But I think the seeds of it were there early on. I come from women who have always loved to adorn themselves, who love fashion, who love to look, good. My mother loved to dress. And so there's always been a bit of the like style as self-expression. That's always sort of been there in the beginning. It's just gotten, I feel way more free about it today than I think I have in the past, which also means free enough to not care.
Right.
Which is free enough to like also be like, I'm not putting on nothing today.
Leggings.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like this is what it is too.
Well, one of the things that
Because
we
it's you. It's
all of it's
yeah.
me. All of it's me.
one of the things we always say is you could wear a paper bag and have style. Like
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
That was the thing that led to us starting the What's Underneath series was that we were like, it actually like clothes are like a tool, but it's like you that's making your style.
Yes.
It's
It's
the way
just
you
you.
walk. It's the
Again,
way you move. It's like
your essence.
Your
right?
essence.
Like your beingness. And
Your spirit.
Your beingness is, you can put
Yeah.
whatever you want to put on that.
And your story a little bit with the girdle, it reminds me a little bit of the very, very first video we ever shot. And she starts talking about how she loves how flat chested she is. That was our very first one. And and I struggled so hard with that. And she starts talking about how she's never worn a bra and she wears the men's shirt open. She doesn't care that she has no cleavage and she likes to show this part of her chest. And from then on, I never ever wore a bra again. I loved it.
I love it.
From then on, I loved it.
I love that she revolutionized your whole idea.
And in that moment, we were both looking at each other going, wow, someone is talking about loving.
Something we're taught to hate.
Yeah, something that we
This is
told
like
we
wild.
should not
That was-
love. One of the things that we do is we give each other permission. And I think we don't realize how much we are giving and revoking permission from one another through either buying into the stories about how we're supposed to be or eschewing them or saying, actually, no, I don't believe any of that.
Yeah.
And as soon as someone's like, oh, I don't believe any of that, you're like, oh, maybe I don't have to believe that either.
Right.
Oh, maybe there's an alternative to this story.
We heal each other
Absolutely.
with the honesty.
With our honesty and our bravery, right?
Bravery
Our
to be
courage,
honest.
our courage to be ourselves
Yeah.
absolutely unleashes the ability for other people to do the same
Right.
thing.
There couldn't be anything possibly wrong with you if it's you.
Not possible. Not
Yeah.
possible. Like, hello, you came here. Right?
This is your feeling that's coming out of you. This
Yes,
is how
right?
you
Like,
feel.
this is
Yeah.
just us. This is just us.
You want to cry. You want to.
All of it is
Yeah.
just being human. It's all part of the experience, right? And the idea that there's some wrong part of the experience,
Yeah.
when we really interrogate it, just doesn't make any sense. You know,
We're not accidents.
Yeah, like none of
It
this
makes no sense.
None of
It's
this is
crazy.
accidental.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like we don't look at a tree and be like, oh,
no,
damn, that one's kind of
that
like fat.
branch,
Like that,
you really did that with that branch? No,
Yeah.
Exactly.
right?
It's like that obvious.
yes,
It should be.
yeah, and it is when we sit with it, but we've tied so much to it. We have now connected the story of our resource and the story of our worthiness and the
Mm.
story of our belonging and all of these other things tied to it, which make the stakes feel so real, right? It's like, right, this notion is ludicrous, but what I might lose feels so real
And
that I
this,
got to keep believing it.
and the
Belonging.
society is now like structured in ways that there are real impacts to
Yes,
certain.
there are real implications.
There's money to be made from the divisiveness and from putting everyone into a box and making them feel less than.
Yes.
That's where all the money's being made. We had to start over.
Exactly. And that's the exact thing that for me always comes up is like part of what we're doing is peeling back the layers of the illusion, right? There's the illusion that I'm not good enough, right? And then there's the illusion that these systems that have told me that are real, like that they have to be, that
Right.
they're the only option, right? And that's part of what keeps us bought into the cycle is we're convinced that you're right. Like, oh, I won't belong. I won't have what I need if I don't participate in this. And I'm like, that's a lie too. God bless my therapist. She's incredible. And last week we had a session and, you know, there was this belief that I'd been dealing with. And she was like, oh, like you just have to get to the bottom of that belief. Like once you actually welcome it and see it all the way to the bottom of it, then it'll dissolve. Like it won't hold anymore. And so we did an entire session about going to the bottom of that belief. And I have never left more clear about why the world is the way it is than after that session. Because I was like, oh my God, who would want to do that? That was heinous. Like it was so painful to go through the illusion. It was so painful and so scary and so awful. And at the bottom of it was love. Like what was there at the end was complete and total love. But my God, what I had to go through to get it. And I was like, oh, I have a different compassion for humanity and why it's so scary to do the work. Right now, was it worth the payoff? Absolutely. Was it worth being free? Right? To be free of that belief in the way it was imprisoning me in my own life, 1,000,000,000% worth it. And I will never lie to anybody and say it was not terrifying and it wasn't painful, but it was worth it to get to the love that was actually wanting to be touched at the bottom of it.
Do you mind sharing what the
that?
belief was?
Now I got to go back and believe. Okay, so we were working with two different beliefs. One was the belief that I can never have home. That was one belief. But that one wasn't as resonant as the story that was like, I don't belong. It was that. It was, I don't belong. And so we worked with it. And, you know, we started by saying, like, what happens? Can we first just welcome? Can we welcome the story? I don't belong. Can we welcome that? And I could find myself welcoming it and then, like, feeling where I could feel it in my body. I could feel it, like, immediately lodge in my chest and immediately lodge in my throat and my jaw got tight. And then, you know, I let that come in and she was like, are there any, you know, words that come with it? And some words came, but I found that I could only feel it from like my chest up. The whole bottom half of me was like completely numb. And she said, you know, is there anything happening in any other part of your body? And I was like, no. She was like, can you like sense into the lower part of your body? And as I did that, then it felt like I'd been dipped in concrete. Like that's what it felt like. I'd been dipped in concrete. And all of a sudden, my whole body just felt like the heaviest it's ever felt. And then underneath not belonging, oh, it was just so many layers. It's like 7 layers down. And then I would hit a place where it was like, nope, I don't want to feel the thing that's underneath that. And then she'd be like, okay, well, can we welcome resistance, not wanting to feel that? Right? And it's like, okay, I can welcome that. And what was fascinating and has always been like I said, I've been seeing my therapist for 13 years now. So we've done this practice many times with many different things. And what's always fascinating is that as soon as I welcome the thing, whatever the thing is, it immediately is like, okay, I'm
and you
here.
Don't fight it.
Right. As soon as I leave resistance, right? As soon as I leave from being in battle with it, all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's me. And then it becomes this part of me that just wants my attention.
Love.
That just wants love. This part of me that just wants
this
love.
belief that developed
Yes.
way back. You've been like afraid to go into because it was so much scarier then than
and because
it is now.
meant so many things, right?
Yeah.
Like and that's what we got to at the bottom was like, oh, what I really wanted, where this not belonging story came from was like, actually what I want is comfort. and I had a mother who had an addiction, and so there'd be times when she just wasn't there. And what I wanted was comfort. And the story that I made up was that I can't have it, that it's not available to me. And because it's not available to me, it must mean I don't belong. I don't belong to anyone. I don't belong to anything. And that need can never be met. And adult Sonya now knows, like, actually, I can just ask for that. Hey, I just need a hug. Hey, can you just comfort me? But little Sonya, that when that story got lodged in, so many layers got built on top. One, so that I would never have to actually contend with the vulnerability of the thing, right?
The actual thing.
Right. Now it's like, well, I
Walls.
can't have that. So now I need to pretend like it doesn't exist.
You have
Right.
to build you have to build everything around feeling it.
Exactly. So that you
Which
don't
is
have to
preventing you
feel it.
from getting it.
Exactly. So which prevents you from getting it. But because I don't believe I can get it, my best thing is to not need it.
Right.
So now I'm going to build all these things so that I don't need it. So of course I feel like I don't belong.
Right.
Because I built a fortress around myself
You're in your
around my
story.
own vulnerability,
Yeah.
right?
So how would that show up in your life and your relationships? Like the wall of pretending you didn't need it.
It kept me from asking for what I need. It kept me trying to barter for it in these really self-destructive ways. And so what would happen is, rather than just asking for what I need, I'd be like, right, if I'm good enough, if I help enough, if I'm smart enough, if I try enough, if I do all these things, then someone will just give it to me. Then I don't have to ask. So then I never have to feel vulnerable, right? But then, of course, I would put myself in these situations where it was an unmeetable desire, right? One, because it's its own self-fulfilling prophecy. Sitting on the foundation of it is I can't have it. So I'm not going to seek out a place where I can actually get it. So then I'm doing all these things to try to get a thing from a place where it can never be gotten, which just keeps revolving the story. And so once the story just got clear enough to me, and there have been years of seeing the story. Like I can see that story. I see it moving. Oh, I don't want to do that anymore, and changing. And, did a lot of changing the behaviors that led to sort of that seeking and trying and like contorting myself to get the thing, right? I did a lot of work around that. But the tenderness, the vulnerability to just be able to ask
For what you need.
I
ask
really
for what I
relate to
need. That was what was sitting at the bottom that was still very hard to get to. And that's what this exercise allowed me to do, is to be like, at the bottom, there is a thing. And if I can clear all this other illusion, then I can actually get to the truth. And then I can just ask for the truth.
And then it's like,
It's like Rochambeau.
and then also realizing that like you can ask for what you need, you might get it. And if you don't get it, you also aren't going to die.
You'll be okay.
Yeah.
Like you were as a kid.
Yes. What was so wild. So in the middle of the session, I was like, I just want to go lay down. And my therapist was like, I was like, can I lay down? And she was like, no. And it was the first time my therapist has ever told me no. And I could feel the part of me that was like, ah! Like I just wanted to wail. Like I was so sad that she told me no. It was a very powerful moment. One, because we talked about it afterwards and she was like, yeah, I was surprised myself that I told you no. She was like, but going to lay down would be to overly identify with the you in this experience. And you're not actually in this experience. You are observing a story that you have. And as soon as you give into the whims of the story, you validate the story. Go lay down is what tired, vulnerable Sonya who doesn't want to do this anymore because it's so hard. That's what she wants. That's not actually who you are. Right? Like that's just the story dictating itself. So no, we're not gonna give into the story. And it was this pivotal moment where the sympathetic thing would seem like, yes, honey, go lay down. Except you are not Sonya the 5-year-old who's not being comforted.
Right. It was your inner child that wanted to lay down. Right.
That's really, really profoundly progressive and amazing advice from your therapist, because it's a really fine line between, and a difficult one, I think, between getting to the core feeling and not sinking into it and pitying yourself and sinking it and feeling like you're still this and this is still your story.
It's the dance of the victim, right? Like it's the, how much of this do I honor without foregoing my autonomy and my power, right? How do I both honor my experience without becoming my experience?
Yeah, the real key of it all, the real hard thing, at least for me, is that this experience is made you who you are.
Yeah.
Like, don't even hate it.
Yeah, no.
It's like
it's
that's
honor. Can I honor it? It is
Yeah.
all a part of my journey, a necessary part of my journey, a pivotal and, illustrative part of my journey. And it is not me,
right.
right? I am not my story.
Right.
It is just a story.
Right. It's not you, because the actual pain of all of that has driven you to find so much more about yourself, to realize how much more you are than that.
Yeah. And yes, it's like this interesting, and this is one of the things that came through in my time in Senegal. There is a Ghanaian principle in the Twi language called Sankofa, which is to go forward, we must go backward. And so it proposes that in order for us to actually get to where it is that we go, we have to go back and retrieve ourselves, right? I think ultimately that is what I'm talking about radical self-love is it's always there. And the job is not to go figure out where it is. The job is to actually go back and figure out where the breach happened.
Bring that peace back.
Right? And come back to that.
Wholeness.
And this moment where I realized that this thing that shaped me, who my truth was actually at the inception point of it. The truth is that there was a little girl who wanted to be comforted because we're human and because we all want to be comforted, because that's a very human experience. It's all the things afterward that were the illusion. Right? And so there was a way in which going back took me back to that seminal point where a story got made and said, actually, you can go right back there and make a new story. And so right back there is, oh, I do want to be comforted. I don't actually want to sleep. I want to be comforted.
And you don't have to have shame around it.
And I don't have to have shame around it. And I don't have to make a story that it'll never happen. I don't have to do anything except allow this human to have this experience. And for either it to happen or to not. And today, the benefit of this long journey is that I can look at that moment now and know that even if it doesn't happen, it doesn't mean I'm going to die. It doesn't mean that I'm unworthy or unlovable or I don't belong, that all the other things are all the illusion. And it's just, oh, I'm a human and I have a need.
And like adult Sonya's there can
To
be there
give
to
little
for
Sonya that need.
You can
regardless
give
of who on the outside meets
can.
or doesn't meet your needs. My therapist made this ring.
I love it.
And it's like her philosophy is, it's kind of what you were saying about going one step backwards before you go forward. Her philosophy is that like we're always constantly in a spiral of contracting and expanding and contracting and expanding, and you have to go into the be willing to go into the contraction and like tend to that wounded part of you before you can like expand to the next level, and it just never ends.
It never ends.
Not to feel like you're backtracking or you're regressing if you somehow find yourself in that center of the spiral again.
Yeah. It's not a loop. It's not a loop. It's a spiral, right? Which means that as I ascend, everything looks familiar. Like, oh my God, I'm here again, right? Except I'm at a different vantage point. Except I can see it more expansively, right? There's far more of the landscape that I can identify that I could than on the level before, right? And that's always happening. And this idea of like contraction and expansion. The natural world has already told us how to do this. Guess what? You didn't get here except because of some contractions and some expansions. Right. Right? Literally.
Oh, literally.
Literally giving birth.
Yeah. Literally.
Wow, I never thought of that.
Literally.
I think about the tides, but I haven't thought about that.
No, like a womb.
Wow.
Made you think your skull was going to be crushed. And then it expanded. And then it felt that way again. And then it expanded. And then life came. And that's how that goes.
That's crazy. I never thought about that.
We're designed to thrive. Like our body is designed to be whole. Our body wants to thrive. Like our unconscious wants to heal. Our body is always wanting to heal.
All the time.
It heals a cold, but it also heals trauma.
All of it. All of it.
And so sometimes I wake up like with nightmares and I feel the feeling of the child. I feel the trauma. I can't help it. It's coming out of my body. Yeah. It's like, it's just coming out because it wants me to see it. It wants me to feel it. And then I can go right into a meditation or breathing and connect to my heart. And then what do I feel? Love. Like, who am I? Love. Yeah. And I feel like in an hour, I'm together. Yeah. Like Humpty Dumpty is together.
Right, all the pieces back together. Yeah. This idea, this idea of our bodies really wanting to wanting homeostasis. That's
Yes,
ultimately what it is. It's
exactly.
like,
And the world.
right, all beingness desires homeostasis. And it's always trying to get us there. The question is, are we attuned, right? Can we hear? Are we listening? What would we do? How would we move if we really were in the attunement of how connected we are? If we actually lived into
crazy.
that truth,
Yeah.
how would we relate to one another?
Yeah. I
Right?
mean, I thought the pandemic was going to help people see that a little bit as
Yeah.
far
I
as
think with it's still
contraction,
Contraction,
expansion.
it's
yeah.
still that's
I mean, that literally was like, literally you impact every single person around you,
Yep.
and we all are so
if
connected.
you sneeze, you can kill
Yeah.
someone's grandmother. Yeah.
Right. But who wants to contend with that,
Yeah.
right? Like,
No,
again,
that's some
well,
shadow-
what that
that's
requires, right?
Full responsibility for your life.
Exactly. Like, that requires
Every action.
so much intentionality. And we have been so conditioned to live with complete and total unintentionality that, of course, people are like, no, but I don't want to even think about that.
And the individualism and not the
Exactly.
Right,
interdependence.
that every thought and every action has a reaction, and we're here. That is what's going to change it. It's the little choices.
Yeah.
It's the day to day, because the
day-to-day.
problems
Wearing
are
this outfit.
the problems are Titan level problems we're facing right now. But that it's only the equivalent to how powerful we're recognizing that we are inside.
Exactly.
It's that's coming together at
Yeah.
the same time.
It's all happening in real time.
It's exciting.
Yeah, if we could see it in that way, we're in an incredibly powerful point in history. We are an incredibly powerful moment for humanity, right?
The biggest transformation of all of human history is the person my teacher.
Yeah.
It's the biggest transformation
Yeah.
of all of human history right now.
Right now.
It's pretty fucking exciting.
Right. And here's the truth is, like, every moment we get to live like that. What if I am part of the biggest transformation of human history? You know, we tell the story that there's nothing we can do. We tell the story that that we have no impact. And I'm like, what if everything I do has an impact?
And everyone felt that way.
Everyone,
Yeah.
right. Like, what happens if every decision I make means something? The way I've been languaging it is, all of life is asking to be reconciled to love, right? All of life is love trying to remember itself, right?
Exactly.
And so if all
Wow.
of life is love trying to remember itself, and the heinousness that we see is an expression of how far away it is from remembering, and my job is to help life remember its love, then every decision I make is, does this thing I'm doing right now bring life closer or further away from remembering it as love, right?
That is,
If we all get to practice that way.
and that's the revolution.
Yeah.
So you were explaining that the belief that you were working on last week is around belonging, right?
Yeah.
And then you also mentioned something about home.
Yeah.
Do you mind sharing any more about like what that
It's
was?
like, sure.
You don't have to, but
No,
if
I don't mind at all. I don't mind at all. The home is one of those core. I don't know if you all are astrology buffs like
Very.
I am, but
Novices,
my
but
Chiron is
extremely.
in the fourth house.
Oh.
Which is, the fourth house is the house of home, foundation, roots, and Chiron is our wounded healer. It is that core wound that that remains tender in our lifetime, but is our greatest medicine for humanity when we learn to be with the pain of it. And for me, that wound around home and family has been such a consistent one since my youth. My father was in the military. Like I said, my mother struggled with addiction, was out of my life for a considerable amount of time. We moved a lot. I had a lot of displacement. So, of course, not having home, and home being so often how we source our experience of belonging, it led to the story of I don't belong, right? I'm in a new school. I don't know these kids. These folks don't like me. So all those sorts of things would be moving and happening. And home became this thing I just really longed for. And I think there was a period of time where it became synonymous with place, like geography. And I kept trying to figure out how to make home stick, right? So I thought, like, if I paint the walls and buy new furniture here, I won't leave, right? Or if I get a big dog, right, then I'll be here. I kept trying to figure out how to make home stay. And much of this is a journey that began in 2020 for me, where all of these things became so just painfully obvious. All the illusions that I'd built my life on, they just all sort of came crashing down. And from that period of time, there was like, and what's next? And what what gets to fill this space where you had all these illusions. And one of those illusions was this illusion of home. And like, I can make home and I can make it stay. And the message that became so clear is I am my own home, that home is an internal experience, that it is the experience of a connection, a reconnection with my beingness. The ultimate experience of home is radical self-love, right? That is, love is source. If I am dwelling in source inside myself, then I'm at home, right?
The ultimate home.
The ultimate home, right? The only one that actually matters. The only one that's actually going to stay.
Because the rest of it's
The rest
just walls.
of it is, and they tear walls down every day.
Right. And where we're going to, and where we're going to.
Right.
Like when it's all over.
When it's all over, right?
Where we come from, where we're going
yes.
to.
What is the actual place of return? It's to love, right? And so if love is where I dwell, then I'm always at home. I don't say that like that's, some easy thing to master. It's a process, and it can continuous like shedding of an old story again and again and again. And one of the ways that story pops up for me and mice have a real rough relationship. I no longer am willing to say I hate mice, because I feel like that's a strong, they're just out here living their lives too.
They're
right?
doing their thing.
Doing their thing. They are not my favorite creature on the planet. And they have a history, an old history. The first time my mother went into rehab and we had to leave, we were living in California. And so we had to leave because, again, my father was in the military, so he wasn't there. So we sent back to Pennsylvania to go live with my grandmother. And I got to my grandmother's house and she had a mouse infestation. I mean, they were just breeding. They were having babies in our shoes and in the drawers. No. It was awful. Wow. I'd go down to have breakfast in the morning, cereal, and there'd be a dead mouse on the floor. God. It was awful. Yeah. It came to mean like displacement. Like mice became associated with the destruction of my home, right? I've been torn away from home and now I'm with the mice, right? And they stayed in that energy for most of my life. And every time I was at a critical point of like transition in some home, I would get mice every single time. Some energetic precursor to a thing. And up until 2 weeks ago, me and mice have had this like adversarial relationship where I see them and I'm like, here you go again, to just make it so that I can't ever have comfortable experience at home. Right? That is the story. Right? And I was in Ecuador and I had moved multiple places in this land. There are little casitas and I'd stayed in several of them over the month. And there was this really big, nice one with lots of room and a huge outside kitchen. And I was like, oh, why am I not staying in the really nice one? So I moved there. And the day I did the big work with my therapist around belonging, and it was, like I said, it was so hard. And I went to sleep that night and I woke up in the middle of the night. I had to go to the bathroom and I went in the bathroom and then a mouse just ran. And I was like, no!
Oh my God.
So enraged. I'm like, I did so much work and now you're... It felt like I was being bullied. It's like, I can never do enough, right? It's like, oh, sure, you did lots of spiritual work and you healed that thing. Here I am again. And I'm like, you know what? I don't want to deal with you. I want to be a human who's allowed to be afraid of a mouse, right?
Right.
Like people
like,
are
do you
afraid
have
of
to
mice.
keep reminding
right.
me of where I'm supposed to be going?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I was so frustrated by it. And I felt very clearly like I'm not supposed to kill this mouse.
Yeah.
That's
right.
No.
No.
Like you don't get to kill the mouse because you don't, it reminds me of the Nikki Giovanni poem about killing the spider, right? Like, I guess I'm just allowed to kill the things I'm afraid of, right? Ooh. And I was like, oh, right? It's a read, right? A total read. And so I was like, okay, I'm not supposed to kill this mouse. But I was like, I don't want to deal with you. I don't want this. Like, I just want to enjoy a house and be comfortable. And I want you to leave me alone. And one of the women who came up and she was like, I hear essential oils can scare them away sometimes. So she brought me some lavender oil. And the first thing she said when she came is she was like, why are you so far away from everyone? Because this house was very removed. And I was like, oh, it hadn't occurred to me in that way. And I was like, well, I mean, then she walked in and saw the nice house and was like, well, I get it. And then later, the other woman said, do you know about mouse medicine? And I said, no. And she said, well, in indigenous Mohican culture, part of what mice do is that they are deeply familial and communal. and that they, they represent our ties to family and kinship. So, like, perhaps and immediately I got it. One, every single time that I'd ever left a place, right? And every time there was a mouse encounter, I was leaving a place where I lived by myself and I ended up moving into community. And what was true about the initial mouse incident with my grandmother is that I was leaving this isolation of my mother and this experience of neglect, right?
And
I
there
was
was tons
alone,
of mice.
right? And I was moving in with my family, with community that
Wow.
was going to hold me in it. But at the time, the only way I could perceive that mouse was as heralding the destruction of my family rather than the invitation into
Inviting
family,
community and
right?
belonging.
You're right. Actually inviting me to
Wow,
belonging.
fascinating.
And I'd always only seen it the other way. And this first time 2 weeks ago, I was like, oh, the mouse is actually saying, hey, it's time to go back to community. It's time. There are people who want you. The mouse is actually telling me you belong someplace and it isn't here by yourself. And so, I'm in the beginning parts of this new story, this new story about home, this new story about connection that doesn't have to mean the destruction of an old thing, but the invitation into a new thing. Yeah.
Wow, that's so powerful. Did you move back close to
Yeah,
people?
that night my friends came, took my suitcases, and I moved literally to the little conjoining room with my good friend.
And would you say that like isolation has been one of the like walls of some kind that like as far as like I can't get my needs met, I can't belong kind of?
Absolutely. I think so. And there's an interesting balance. I'm a person who both needs solitude. I need it. It's an important part. But I think what happens, and I think part of what the mouse comes to say is, it's enough now. Like, yes, you did that. You did what you needed to do. That was part of the moving through that energy of belonging. The mouse was like, you did all that good work today. You did enough. You don't have to be by yourself anymore.
Oh, right.
Go be with community.
Oh.
Yeah.
And how does like all of the like nomadic traveling life like relate to this idea of home for you?
It's been like, hey, guess what? You really have to practice I am my own home, right? You really have to live it now. Like, guess what? There will not be a geographical physical location. It will be in you, and you will have to source it internally such that you can be sustained through being in a new place every 3 days, in a new country, in a new land, and places where I don't speak the language, and all of these things, all the experiences that would have me feel that deep sense of not belonging, that deep sense of disconnection from home. All of the external circumstances that would feed that are there. And then the question is, who do I believe? Do I believe the illusion out there? Or do I believe this deep practice I've been in?
We're given what we need to deal with.
Yes. Yeah, I told my therapist, I was like, I don't want to get over the mouse thing. And she's like, okay. She looked at me like, if that's what, and I was like, oh, fine.
For me, I'm like, can I just stay a people pleaser? Like,
it's
it's like I
it's
can't.
so much easier.
I can't deal with this. Like, it's way too hard.
Right. Except the truth is that it's not easier.
No, it's not.
Right. That's the story we tell ourselves. Like, this thing blows. I was like, I would love to not be utterly disrupted by a tiny creature that's like 2 inches. That's ridiculous. Like, all this power I'm moving in the world with, but that's the thing that that completely, disarms me. Maybe I want to be in the fullness of my power, even then.
I have a question. So what?
Get him.
It's us on this topic. Are you changing topics?
Well, I was just gonna say like, you can change it if you don't like what I say.
Okay, go.
We all are faced with these struggles, these things that we're faced with that are the hardest things that we don't want to grow. We don't want to go through this again. We want to. But you have to, and how you respond to it is how it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Like, how do you work on a day-to-day basis to love? And what does it look like when you're not in it? You're so looked up to and so revered for this topic, and like, what is the reality of actually being able to be there? And what are the hard parts?
Absolutely. I think.
Is that okay?
You win, yeah. Your question was better than mine. Yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes this question feels hard to answer because it's just my life. Like I'm the fish in the ocean, right? And so I'm like, it's the water. I don't know what you're talking about. It's just
It's so obvious,
the habitat. But I think what is true is, for me, first step is, there's a thing moving in my life. Do I want to look at it or don't I want to look at it? Now, for me, and this is not everybody's experience, back to astrology, I have 6 placements in Scorpio. Life was
Me too.
like,
What
oh,
is
Not
your
six.
son?
You don't have six.
I do. I have more, I think. I have more.
But she has
Well,
her
I'm a
sun
double.
and her moon.
your sun and your rising.
Sun, moon.
Your sun and your moon. Got
What-
it.
I'm the rising, so between us, we've got it all.
I love
What are
it.
you?
I'm Scorpio sun,
Oh.
Scorpio. Wait, I'm Scorpio sun, Scorpio Mars, Scorpio Mercury, Scorpio Uranus, North Node, and Midheaven.
I'm North. No, I've got like 6 or 7.
It's intense.
intense.
Yeah,
We're intense.
That's it. But to that point, my lessons are intense. Right? Like it's not
Nothing's
like
shallow.
it's nothing shallow.
Nothing's shallow.
I don't get to skate. Like life
No.
is like, oh, you didn't want to look at that? Great, we'll drop a house on you.
Totally. Totally.
Like I'm just not wired for the like, oh,
Yeah.
I get to just sit in this discomfort and never change
Oh,
it.
God.
Right? I'm here for death and rebirth. That's what I came to do. And so, cue death and rebirth. Now the key is, can I stop fighting it? Right? That's been the practice. And so when destruction comes, first of all, can I stop courting it myself? Right? Because it's inevitable. Part of what I think I would do is, because we like control, right? It's like I will create the conditions for my own self-destruction, and then I'm not at the whim of life, right? I mean, for example, what I mentioned earlier about like, no, I won't be vulnerable. I won't deal with vulnerability. Instead, I will be, I will have this sort of hyperfixation on care and service and being good enough for the other person. But I'm also going to date people who are like completely emotionally unavailable and absolutely can't meet me in any way, and then resent whatever it is I try to do. Perfect scenario
to never have your needs met.
To never have my needs met. But if I make it so that I never get my needs met, then I'm never actually surprised.
Right.
Right? Then life is doing what I expected it to do anyway, and I get to
Right.
move on with my victim and my misery, right?
Ooh.
As opposed to saying, what happens when I meet life in the fullness of its possibility, and I'm not trying to control the outcome by setting up the game in advance. Right? What is that? Girl, I'm sorry. I feel like I'm reading you over here. It happens. But then I just get to be with what life is. And the piece is, this has been the work. Do I trust that life is actually on Team Sonya? Because if I trust that life is actually on Team Sonya, then whatever is happening is still for Team Sonya. It's still actually meant for my good, for my highest good. Now, that might not be what I want, right? But what I want and what is my highest good are not necessarily the same. So the daily work is, can I bridge the gap between what I want and what is in my highest good? Can I make that closer and closer and closer so that my desires actually align with what is in my highest good? Then life doesn't have to self-destruct on me trying to get me to my highest good, because I'm already moving toward it. Right?
I mean, isn't that what it's not living in fear.
It's not living in
which
fear.
is the source of all the problems.
Exactly. Right. And all the manifestations of fear: scarcity, doubt, not belonging, disconnection, unlovability, violence, like all of these stories, right? And again, life doesn't play small with me. And so the bigger the stakes, like I said, in 2020, my life collapsed. Like everything fell apart in the course of 5 days.
What happened?
Like what?
I came back from a tour in the US. I was supposed to be doing retreats, radical self-love retreats in New Zealand. I was bringing people in. There were 3 cases of COVID when I got on the plane.
Oh.
And I was like, maybe we shouldn't do this, because I don't know where this is going, but I don't want to be responsible for people here. So I canceled those retreats. I was living with my partner at the time. On a Tuesday, my dog was really sick. Anastasia, who I'd had for 12 years, she was really sick. I took her to the emergency vet, and they told me that she had cancer. On Wednesday, my partner who I'd been living with told me that they were in love with their coworker.
Oh, no.
On Thursday,
Wow.
the relationship broke up. On Friday, the world went into a lockdown for COVID.
Wow.
Saturday, my partner moved out. 5 days later, my dog died. And I was alone in the house I was supposed to have these retreats in by myself without a dog for the next 3 months.
Wow.
And that was the beginning of, hey, all the illusions are up, pumpkin. It's just you and all your stories. What are you going to do? And that was the moment where I was being asked to release all of my own constructions of self-protection, right? which were ultimately self-destruction. They had just destructed before me. And it was like, what's now? What's true now? And the only thing that could get me through that moment was the idea. I was like, either life hates me and wants me, just doesn't want me to be here, or there's something for this. And, I'm really grateful for the seeds of my ancestors. This takes me all the way back to where we began in this Sankofa, right? In order to go forward, we have to go back. I'm wired for survival. And the truth of the matter is we all are. It's the only way that your line is still here. Right. Because genetically, it's far more likely that a line dies off than a line continues. So if you are actually a human on the planet right now, there is some level of survival instinct that is inside of us innately. And whatever that is, that kicked in. And I was like, okay, this feels like it could kill me, but I'm not going to let it. Something's trying to get my attention. What is it? And then I got really curious and exhausted and delirious, but desperate to know. Because I was like, I don't want to keep doing this. It's too much. Right. And so,
like, why is this happening?
Yeah, you don't have to yell at me like this no more. I'm listening. You have my attention. And life was like, great. I have things for you to do. And for a period of time, I actually started getting very auditory messages, like actual get up and put this on.
Whoa.
And it was like close. Like I'm in the middle of a lockdown.
Right.
I'm not going nowhere. Like you couldn't get takeout in New Zealand. You could do nothing.
Oh, you were in New Zealand.
There was nothing you could do. And I was being told every day to get up and shower and put on specific clothes. At 3:00 in the morning, I would be awakened out of my sleep for months, 3:00 in the morning, and sent to drive to the ocean. Like it was wild.
Wow.
By this time, like I'd been directed to set up an altar in my house. I was being sent to the ocean to get ocean water for my altar. And then this is when I started sort of really looking at astrology and trying to learn my astrology. I started looking more into tarot. I had another mouse incident. And it was just like, are you paying attention? Every day there are messages for you. Are you actually listening to them? And in the middle of the pandemic, I left New Zealand and I came back to the United States. It's a wild time. This was the election. I mean, it was a wild time. Everybody was like, what are you doing? But I was clearly being given instructions, right? But I started listening. Everyone will not have the level of outlandish story that I have around it. But that doesn't mean life isn't trying to get your attention. And so every place where there was like, I built up some massive like function of denial or distraction is like, can I identify where that is? Can I see it? And you can see it because it's the place where there's pain. It's the place where you're trying to avoid feeling the thing. If I stop trying to avoid the thing and I actually go to it, and we can do it on a small level, we can do it at what's the thing today I'm trying to avoid? And
what were you avoiding? Was there an overall, was there something that was?
Well, again, this belonging, this trying to figure out how to get to, or how to give to get, right? What this extractive nature of relationship.
And not receiving, like not receiving.
Well, I could never receive because I was a sieve. No matter how much you poured into me, I couldn't actually feel it. And I was choosing people who didn't have the capacity to pour into me. Right. Because the story was, if I could be good enough, then you will. And then I'll get what I need finally. Right.
And that's out of balance.
Right. Replaying this trauma with my mother. And life was like, you can't heal this thing with your mother through the people you're dating. And it's an inappropriate location to try to, and by this time my mother had passed. And so I was living out this, like trying to heal this core wound. And aren't we all, right? Like, this is not an unusual.
I have the same exact
I was like, this is not a hot take. Most of us are dating people. We just trying to heal our parents' stuff, right?
Or everything in our life. Everything in our lives
whatever
is a
the pain
reflection
is.
of the childhood.
Right.
Wound.
Whatever the story is that we developed when we were young. And so then the question becomes, can I just actually deal with the thing? Can I stop with the distractions? That's what life was saying. Could you stop with the distractions and deal with the thing? It's here.
And feel the pain.
And feel what needs to be. Can you grieve? So much of life right now
can let go.
Is a function of our refusal to grieve. We are
projecting.
We are standing in the grave Like literally
Yes.
the graveyard of our undealt with stuff as a collective.
Yeah. Everyone's trauma is out.
It's
in
just out there.
full-
It's like the slip hanging out the bottom of the dress. It's like, girl, you see that behind you? It's like,
like how dark we can be as human beings
Yes.
we cannot heal that until we see it.
Until we acknowledge it, right? And then grieve. And then grieve.
Otherwise, you're just stepping around it and skipping over it and living your life and dying, and then it just keeps going on and handing the trauma down. Like it doesn't stop until you see the shadow
and deal with
just
it.
like every individual has to see their shadow to heal.
Yeah.
And so does our society.
And so the collective does.
And that's what's happening right now.
And that's like the moment we're in. And just like you said, what grief allows us to do is to finally release, right? Like grief is what holds, it's the ceremony that we do to allow ourselves to move through the transition of one phase into another, right? That's life and death is just transition, right? And part of the reason we have memorial services and ceremony around death is so that we can create the container to move forward. We do not involve ourselves as a collective in creating the ceremony to complete a thing so that we can move forward, which is why we haven't moved forward.
And why we continue
why we're stuck
in the trauma and in the
Exactly.
cycle.
And I like how you were saying that it starts though, like every day with looking at like, what am I trying to avoid today? What am I not looking at today that I'm skirting around?
That's a great question. What am I avoiding today? What emotional truth, what old past pain am I trying to avoid today?
And that's why the rebel becomes the dictator. The rebel becomes the dictator. Like we never stop the cycles of violence.
And and you were saying with your therapist too, it sounds like your process is like looking at the thing and then welcoming everything that comes up, every ugly thought, every resistance, and like
all of it.
Accepting all of it.
What if all of it's allowed here? Again, if all of life is just asking to be reconciled to love, and what would I do right now to help this thing remember its love? I would love it.
You have to
I would love it.
Which is like to kind of pivot to like body stuff. I mean, for me with my like journey with my body image, like the very first, because I struggled a lot with my body image growing up. It's part of what led us to this work. For me, like the very first thing that I just like instinctively did as we were starting to like heal through StyleLikeU and through everyone we were interviewing was just like staring at my naked body in the mirror, or she took pictures of me like undressed. And the first moment was me just being like, this is hideous. And like I hate, just being like letting myself hate it, see it. Because I'd spent my whole childhood like hiding under clothes and not looking at it, or like being the girl in like the bikini pictures that's like wearing a towel because I don't want to see it. And the first step was just looking at the thing and being like, I don't like this, and then allowing myself to not like it. And now, like fast forward, this is like over a decade ago. Now, like I like it, but you have to first let yourself like allow the ugly thought, allow the
indoctrination. I mean, we have it right. Like the story is there. I don't belong. It was there. I have to contend with all the things it is that I've been indoctrinated to believe. And I have to say, you can be here too. Right. And actually,
love it.
Yes. And once it's here, it just doesn't need to protest anymore. Like part of its protestation is because you've left it on the porch. Right. It's cold outside. It's like, let me in.
Yeah.
It's neutral. You neutralize it.
Exactly. Right. It doesn't have to yell for your attention anymore.
Is there any like insecurity that you're currently working on overcoming? Maybe a little bit more on like the body level?
I mean, yeah, like in the sense that like I still live in a world that has stories about what body should be and should not be. My body has shifted a lot since I became a vegan. And there are all the external messages about what that means, and people who have value judgments on the way my body has changed. And so that's interesting. One of the things
what do you mean by
meaning
that?
Is it
like, I'm thinner, and so people think that's better. There's a certain amount of, sort of inner resolve that I have to hold to not let that become a narrative that infiltrates me.
And attached to like
and
that
become
validation.
Attached to that story as the best story, as the good story, as the story we want. Right. Because people will certainly give it to you a lot. So I think that's part of it. And co-opt it. Like I saw an article popped up on the internet, and it's a weight loss surgeon who wrote a Medium blog about my body changing.
Yours?
Yes. And connecting it to his work as a bariatric surgeon. And I was, what?
Wow.
I was like,
What the
yo, this is wild and utterly offensive. It wasn't even, and like took a picture of some bald woman bodybuilder and like had her as it was outrageous. It was really outrageous. And I was like, okay, I could get all up in arms about, how about this? I'm going to stay as detached from this as I am from all of the others. Like, once it's out on the internet, it's not mine to deal with. Like, that's just the world. And I'm not going to be like trying to chase down
Control. Yeah.
Control. Then like, I know who I am. And that's actually what I need to stand in. And so part of my body shifting is that my breasts that have always been very, very, very large for my whole life have gotten a little bit, they're still large, but they've gotten smaller. But now I have like, they're deflated a little bit. The boobs are not as voluminous as they used to be. And I found myself being like, what is that loose skin, right? In addition to the fact that I am aging, you know, I'm 3 years, 2.5 years, I'll be 50, which is wild to me. So the story of an aging body and the way that bodies shift as they're aging, I find myself having to contend with that. I can hear the stories pop up, right? Like, oh, that's a narrative I've been fed about the aging body. In addition to the things that are real about the aging body, like things hurt today that just never hurt before. I exercise more now than I ever have my entire life, and things hurt today that didn't hurt before. And that doesn't mean anything. How do I not make meaning of it other than to notice it, right? And to tend to what has to be tended to, right? Oh, my back hurts. It would like a little more salve today.
Literally the same thing. It's the same thing as the deeper thing. Like just observe it.
Can I observe it? Can I welcome it? Can I acknowledge it? And can I tend to what is present without making up a story about it? So that's kind of like where I am today. And it doesn't feel like an insecurity, like it alters any way in which I'm living, but I notice it. Actually, that's the way I experienced it today. And I'm really grateful. I can see it as it's like a thing in the corner that's calling me. Hey, you want to come over here? Hey, I've got a great story about how you're just getting wrinkly. You know? And I'm like, no, I don't. Thanks. I see you. You're doing what you were designed to do. Okay.
I'm a lot older than you. I'm in my mid 60s, and I'm finding it fascinating to experience it all differently than I thought I was supposed to. Like I enjoy like, oh, this isn't like when I turn 50.
It'll be this.
When I turn 40.
Yeah.
Each time it's gotten so much better. Like 30 was harder.
Oh, by far. By far.
Because of what I thought it was supposed to be. And like as time goes on and you debunk.
Yes.
It
gets easier. Well, because again, to this point of like life actually being on our side, it's like once you let go of all that stuff, life's like, hey, I really wasn't trying to make you suffer.
Right.
You were adding the suffering.
Yeah, it's like the joke, like more and more and more, I see that the joke is on us. Like we got to like stop, you know, because like this isn't true.
Yes. Yeah. We've made it so much harder than it actually has to be. The more I stop making it hard, the easier it gets.
Right. Like what is true, like my upper back is really hurting and I definitely have pain in my back. So when you were talking about it, I was like, oh yeah. Things hurt more for sure. What's not true is that you don't matter. What's not true is that you're irrelevant. What's not true is that you don't keep growing. What's not true is that you don't become happier. What's not true is that you're not beautiful. Yeah. That you're not sexy. That you're not all these, it's all that shit.
Yeah. Right. The idea that those things, that back in my pain means something other than I need to stretch.
Right.
Like that's really the end of the story.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Or that your face at 50 is less beautiful than it was at 30 or 20.
It's just different.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Totally. Yeah. I find myself so much more beautiful today than I ever did before.
I feel the same.
But in part it's because there is something I'm tapped to on the inside that I'm so clear shows outside.
Yeah. 100%.
I feel exactly the same.
It does.
Yeah.
Thanks.
It definitely does. It definitely does.
So are you ready to change into your next level self-love outfit?
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Okay.
So adorable.
Amazing. And in particular, the socks, slippers are
my
incredible.
koala socks.
Wow.
Okay, so tell us why this?
I'm in my season of less doing, more being. Yeah, I don't, it was funny a couple of months ago, my dad was like, so what are you working on? And I was like, nothing. and he was like, huh? And then my sister asked me the same question and I was like, nothing. And she was like, huh? And I realized that part of the reason they were so shocked is because so much of my former life was defined by what I was doing. And I feel so not interested in that as the orientation for how it is that I exist in the world anymore. And I'm so joyfully resting. I mean, like I'm chilling. Like this attire is what it is that I desire to be doing. You know, when I've had talks in the recent past, my message to people is always like, do less, do less, and then see what arises. Like, see what wants to come forth, not from the idea that there's something else you have to do, but like just from resting in your beingness, what wants to arise. And I'm so enjoying just being in some warm, cozy socks and a onesie and not defining myself by what it is I do.
Jumping off a cliff.
Yeah. And trusting that like whatever it is, it's gonna be good. It's gonna be enough. I'm taken care of. I'm held.
Oh, I didn't notice them at first.
You didn't see the koalas.
And have you like been able to really just flow into that, or has it been an ebb and flow?
That's a good question. And I think I'm not totally sure how to language it, because part of I think what happened when I left Aotearoa in 2022 and began this sort of journey of nomadic living, I was sort of thrust into it in that sense. I thought that I was just leaving New Zealand for 5 weeks. I thought I was coming on a tour in the US and then I was going back. And then life was like, that's not what's happening at all. And all of a sudden, all these ways that I used to define, you know, how I understood myself and how I understood my place in the world and all of those things started shifting really dramatically. And I think that there have been moments where it was like, okay, we're going to do again. And then we're going to get back on the whatever. And, you know, like something else is going to come along and then you're going to do that thing. And every time I thought that, it didn't happen. Right. Just like I thought every time I was like, oh, I'm going to go, you know, get a house now and sit down. Like life just kept being like, you think you got this figured out. And the point of jumping off the cliff is not so that you can then build a bunch of things on your way down and construct the world you're going to land in. It's to trust.
Let go.
Right? It's to let go. And so it's been, in that sense, it has been the ebb and flow of like, wait a minute, I want to grab again. Oh no, let go. Oh, wait a minute, I want to let go.
I really can relate to that personally. It's
Yeah.
the gripping and then the letting, and that we're not in control. I mean, that's like the best. I think that's just the most relieving thing.
Again, it's only relieving if you believe life is in service of your highest good. Otherwise, it's terrifying. And
of
you're like,
course-
it's trying to kill me, right? I have to
Right.
control everything because life's trying to kill me. Once I really got that it wasn't, once I got that the mouse meant you're being sent to community, once I
You're
got
being embraced.
that the thing that was the most terrifying was actually always trying to tell me that I was the most loved. Once I got that, I was like, you're right. I don't have answers.
Yeah, and then when it comes in that way, and it comes in that really like cosmic way, like you can't like argue with it.
It's so obvious.
It's such a gift when it comes that way.
It's life's ideas have always been better than mine. And now that I really trust that it really wants nothing but love. It wants itself, which is love.
Right.
Then it's like, oh yeah, I don't actually need to figure that out at all.
Yeah, when it's not against you.
It's totally for me.
Ugh. So intense. It's so hard and so right. And I love the pajamas because I'm always like doing the next thing, doing the next thing, doing the next thing, doing the next thing, like, and then the things that just happen where I can't. You know, like, and you just really need to put your pajamas on.
Yeah, it's just the case. Stop. We can stop now. Like right now, I feel like, again, at the level of the collective, it's like, hey, could y'all stop? And COVID tried to get us to. It really did.
It really did.
It was like, hey,
and if we don't learn, it's going to
out.
happen
And
again.
We will.
It's
going to
coming.
happen again.
Absolutely. Without, I mean, it didn't leave. It's just, you know,
We're just in denial.
Right, we're just in denial. And it's like, okay, we will have to drop a house again.
The veil is off.
Yeah.
You said earlier how much you're trying to live in a space of joy and light. When do you feel the most joy?
I mean, I think I still feel the most joy in nature. where I was staying in Ecuador is at the top of a mountain in the forest,
Mm-hmm.
and then the rest of it is just ocean. It's just the
Mm-hmm.
South Pacific Ocean. And I would wake up and I would just be like, wow, it's so right sizing to be like, I'm this little thing. And then there are oceans,
Mm-hmm.
and there are lots of them. And then there are mountains, and there are lots of them. And then there are flowers, and there are lots of them. And when I am in nature, I'm so clear that I am both utterly essential to this thing and absolutely unnecessary to it all at the same time. Right? That I'm so important to the ecosystem. And I am but one grain, right? And what all needs to happen for this thing to move. And that is so humbling. And it's also so awe-inspiring. And it really is my happy, happy, happy place. I'm also in my happy place right now because I am redecorating my girlfriend's house, which is bringing me great joy because I've been without a house for 2 years. And so, and style and aesthetic is such a big part of my expression. And I love homemaking. I love being like lamps and the rugs and the colors and the textures and the things. And I feel like life is like, we are not denying that you will get to have the opportunity to do this. You get to do this as a gift, as an extension of yourself for someone that you love. You get to do it in a healthy relationship, firsttimeever.com. You get to.
That's amazing.
It's so good. It's so good to be like this offering of this thing that I love to do, that I get to experience and play in and have fun with. And do for someone else. Right?
And I think it's good to remind people also that, because I think this, it's so hard when you have these rock bottoms like what you had in at the beginning of COVID, like this, everything being pulled out from under you and crashing, and it happens.
Yeah.
I don't think any of us can get away from it.
Yeah, it's part of life.
And then to see now where you are now.
Yeah. It's like, it was for me. It wasn't against me.
It propels you forward.
Life was like, we have something for you that's better than you can imagine, but you got to be willing to let go of all the stuff you think it is.
Not grip on.
Now you're chilling in your pajamas.
Now I'm chilling in my PJs,
decorating your girlfriend's house.
Living my best life.
When do you feel the most at home in your body?
It's a good question. When I'm having a good meal, actually, it's when I am nurturing and nourishing my body. That's when I feel the most at home in it. Like when I'm really tending to it, like I value it, like it's this location. Yeah, it's like the cathedral of my divinity. And when I get to treat it like the cathedral of my divinity, that's when I'm feeling really good. So if that involves like really making a really beautiful, delicious meal for myself or for someone I care about. I used to hate the gym. I hated the gym. And I don't hate the gym anymore. And after a while, I'm just, even if it's not the gym, my body's just like, we would like to move. And I'm like, okay, all right, we would like to move. Okay, let's go move. All of the acts of care that are about my nourishment, and that's distinct from my comfort. Right? Like, how do I choose nourishment over comfort?
What do you mean by that?
Nourishment is the deeper level, right? It is not just what will satisfy or satiate the top level. It's not just what's good on the tongue, right? Like what's good on the tongue is comfort. What's good for the whole being, for my integrated beingness, that's nourishment. And I've often chosen comfort over nourishment. But I find now that my body's like, no, we are a whole organism and we all get a vote. The tongue isn't the only thing that gets to decide today, Sonya, whether or not this is what you're going to do, right? Like my whole beingness as an integrated beingness now gets a say so in what it needs for its care and its well-being. And from that place, those choices that take in the whole, those are nourishment. The ones that take in just the thing that's the loudest and the most cranky, that's comfort. Yeah. And I'm and more in a very vacillating and imperfect way, but more and more learning to choose nourishment over comfort.
Yeah, and it reminds me of like, isn't that's like the ultimate healing, the not belonging little pain.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
like,
Because she actually wants to be like, wow, when you just said that, it really brought up something. One of the core wounds of that time was because I was in this experience of neglect, I oftentimes didn't have enough food.
Mm.
Right. And so I
mm,
would be in the situation where there was the little girl who actually needed nourishment, but would choose comfort, or would have someone bring
what you could
whatever it
get,
is, what you could get. Right.
anything to ease.
Anything, anything to just sort of take off that top pain. But
Oof.
that's not an integrated way of being. That's a survival strategy, right?
Mm.
And we need survival strategies. But I was having a conversation with a friend of mine the other day about what becomes possible when we leave survival and we move into thriving. None of the things that I'm talking about could I have dealt with when I was in survival.
Mhm,
Right?
right.
Like none of it. Like that's why it's called survival. We don't have to stay there.
We think we do.
We think we do, but we don't have to stay there.
That's
And
the thing.
from-
If we all grow up,
We have to let
getting out
go
our
of this.
stories is such an important part of healing
Yes.
the world.
This is what feels really important because there are always people who are like, for some of us, that's not a choice. Absolutely. For some folks, right now, survival is what it is.
Mhm.
For sure.
Right? To me, that makes it incumbent upon those of us who are not in that circumstance to do our evolutionary work, because that is what is going to create the energetic reverberance to help move those people out of that.
Definitely.
Those
Oh my
people
God.
won't get free if we stay acting like we're in survival when we're
Right,
not.
right. And being in our triggers.
And being in our triggers and our traumas,
Yeah.
and we're not actually even in the just surviving part.
Right,
No.
right.
So
That's such a good point. What's your wildest dream for the world?
I mean, I feel like I've only been yelling it for the last decade and a half. I'm like, radical self-love. Can we recognize how innately divine and necessary we are? Can we see ourselves as part of the whole, right? Right? So that we as a collective can be nourished instead of just comforted, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't even think I'm an optimist. I consider myself a realist, but what I believe is real is that this thing is dying and something new wants to come to be. And I'm like, word, we get to make it up because we made up this. We made this up.
created this.
Right. We made this up. It's trash.
We created the hellhole.
It's
Certainly
trash.
God did not create the hellhole.
I am
We created the
going
hellhole.
for brand new, exciting. Tony K. Bombara says, make the revolution irresistible. What I'm excited about is creating a new possibility of beingness that's so delicious that you would be a fool if you didn't want to come hang out in that world.
Yeah, it's like, why wouldn't everyone go where the love is instead of the hate? Like,
Why?
There's no chance.
Right.
If you offered it.
If you just make it so clear that this is
The way.
way more
This
enjoyable.
is the way.
This is the joy. This is the peace. This is it. All the things we think we were trying to get over there, guess what? It's just here. Just here.
And what do you think is like one thing that everybody that's watching this can do in their life to start making that world? Like, what's the small thing they could do?
Every day, ask yourself a question. Is the thing I'm doing for myself or for someone else helping it remember it is love? What can I do right now to help this moment remember that it is love?
Wow. When you say it, I feel like this, really feel it inside.
Yeah.
Last question. Sadly, you go on forever. What would you tell little Sonya to never change about who they are?
Oh, girl, never stop asking questions. Never stop asking questions. Ask them all and keep talking. Eventually, there are going to be some people who think it's cool.
Were you talking to yourself a lot?
Oh, I talked to myself. Everything talked. The soap talked, the washcloth talked, the toothpaste and toothbrush talked. Everything talked. And so, yay. I'm like, yay, keep talking. It's good.
And you did that, and that's what's made you so magnetic and so having such a huge effect on the world. You stepped into that. You didn't believe that wasn't worthy.
It was.
You did it.
It just was who
you
it
did
was.
it, and
I said,
you've
okay.
had it, and you're having an enormous impact.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. That's so inspiring. Everyone needs to know that. Do the thing that you're supposed to be doing. Just do it.
Just do it.
Step right into it and do it, and then the rest will fall into alignment.
Absolutely.
Thank you
Yeah.
so,
Thank you so
so,
much.
Thank
so,
you.
so much.
So
Thanks for
beautiful.
having me. What a delight. And thank you all for just continuing to create platforms where we get to be our most expressive and radical and loving selves.
Oh, you're so welcome. That's we're honored. We're
so
honored.
honored
We're honored
to have you part of it.
And I love your pajamas. I'm
I know,
honored.
it's
that-
like- I'm just thinking about-
Thanks for letting me.
I
I'm
love
like
it.
now
In my
imagining little Sonya like talking to the washcloth in her
Oh,
pajamas. with her
totes.
little
This was
things.
absolutely what we were
So
giving.
cute.
Minus the lashes, but absolutely.
Thank you so much to Sonya for being here and sharing her beautiful self with us. And if you want to read all of Sonya's incredible books, you can do so by going to her website at SonyaReneeTaylor.com. And make sure you check out her latest book, The Book of Radical Answers. See you next week. We're new at this part.
All good. It's
We're
all
like,
good. We're on camera.
Wow, Mom. That was such an amazing day. And thank you guys so much for watching. It means so much to us. Mom, what did we forget?
I'm not sure. I have no idea what you're talking about. Oh, yeah. You got to tell everyone to make sure they subscribe.
Share, comment, come back next week.
Tell your friends.
Tell your friends, tell your mom, tell your daughter. We're also starting a newsletter, so please head over to our website, StyleLikeU with the U.com, to be on our newsletter list and help us and be empowered to not be so reliant on the algorithms of social media. Yeah, I think that covers it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Sending you all lots of love. Be quiet, Angel. Thank you.